Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something kind of controversial? We're looking at standardized tests today,
Ooh, fun.
but not just like how to pass them or study tips.
Right.
We're going way deeper,
Okay.
asking the tough question. Do these tests actually go against the core values of a democratic society?
Whoa.
Big stuff, right?
Yeah.
Our source material is this super interesting blog post.
Okay.
It's titled, and get ready for it, "You're gonna kill or give a seal and back your body, gonna continue, gonna kill, wait, see what think of them." Okay. I know, right?
Yeah.
It translates to our examination system is contrary to democratic ideals. Published on October 8th, 2024, on a Nepali blog called Small Steps.
So this is focusing on Nepal specifically.
Well, yeah, the author specifically calls out Nepal's, their secondary education examination and also their 12th grade exams.
Gotcha.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
The issues they raise, super relevant to pretty much any system that relies on standardized testing.
So it's like a case study, but with broader implications.
Exactly.
Cool.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Yeah, let's break it down.
You know those big democratic values? Like everyone having equal opportunities, different talents being celebrated, everyone gets a voice.
The good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. The blog argues that standardized tests actually contradict those values.
At every turn.
Yeah, pretty much.
No, that's a bold claim.
Right. So they start with this idea of educational equality.
Which should be like the foundation, right?
Totally. The cornerstone of a fair society. But the blog argues that instead of making things more equal, these tests actually widen the gap.
Between who?
Between the haves and the have-nots, basically.
Those with resources versus those without.
Right.
I can see that.
Yeah. They even give this example.
Okay.
Students from wealthier families, they have access to all this extra help.
Like what?
Tutoring, test prep courses, even better study materials.
So it's not a level playing field from the start.
Exactly. And that puts students from less privileged backgrounds at a huge disadvantage.
It's like the test is measuring privilege, not actual ability.
Totally. It's like, are we measuring potential or just access to resources?
Right. That's a big problem.
And it gets worse because then the blog dives into how these tests can actually stifle individuality.
Which is, again, another core democratic value.
Right. And they use this awesome analogy.
Hit me with it.
Imagine you have this incredible eagle soaring through the sky.
Majestic.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Then you force it into a tiny cage.
Oh, no. Poor eagle.
That's what they say standardized tests do. Trying to fit every single student into the same mold.
And evaluating them all in the same super narrow set of skills.
Yes.
So we lose out on all that beautiful diversity.
Exactly. We're talking about creativity, critical thinking, problem solving.
The stuff you actually need in the real world.
Right. Not just to survive, but to thrive.
To contribute to a society that values different perspectives.
They literally say, students should be allowed to fly like eagles that hunt, not be made into caged parrots in the name of passing the sea.
Wow, that's powerful.
Right. Makes you think, are we sacrificing those essential skills all for a good test score?
It's a trade-off we got to think about seriously.
For sure.
And you know what else they bring up?
What's that?
This whole teaching to the test thing.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
And how it narrows the curriculum so much.
Absolutely. Those subjects that don't directly translate to better test scores?
Like art, music, civics.
Yeah, all that gets pushed aside.
It's like tunnel vision, focused only on passing the test.
And maybe missing out on developing well-rounded humans.
Right. And they have this really striking comparison.
Lay it on me.
In the past, students were nurtured and made into warriors. Now they're made into donkeys prepared for exams.
Ouch.
Right. Maybe a little harsh.
Yeah.
But it gets the point across.
It does. This hyper-focus on standardized tests, is it actually hurting more than it helps?
Right. It makes you wonder.
And this narrow focus, the blog argues, it goes hand in hand with stifling critical thinking.
So instead of encouraging students to question, to analyze, to think for themselves.
It becomes all about memorizing facts and finding the right answer.
And that brings up a really interesting point when we think about education and democracy.
Go on.
A healthy democracy needs citizens who can think critically, analyze information, challenge assumptions.
And not just repeat what they've been told.
Right, like robots.
Exactly.
And they really nail it with this point about student voice and participation.
Yeah. In a real democracy, your voice matters. You have a say in decisions that affect you.
But with standardized tests, it's like students are totally left out.
Totally. It's almost like a contradiction, right?
We teach these democratic ideals.
But then create a system where students have zero say.
Yeah, food for thought for sure.
Big time.
So what else? What else does this blog get into?
Well, it talks about the negative consequences tied to bad test scores.
Ooh, that's a scary thought for a lot of folks.
Right. They talk about how failing these tests can lead to budget cuts for schools, even punishments for students and teachers.
Yikes.
Yeah, and they argue that this pressure cooker environment, especially for schools that are already struggling,
Yeah.
it can create a toxic learning environment.
The opposite of what we want.
Right. It's like the focus shifts from supporting students to punishing them for not fitting into this standardized mold.
Doesn't sound very democratic at all.
Right. And that leads to another big point the blog makes.
Yeah.
The tension between standardization and pluralism.
Oh, interesting.
You know, one of the great things about democracy is that it embraces diversity of thought, backgrounds, experiences.
Totally.
But these standardized tests often impose a single, often culturally biased standard on everyone.
Like saying one size fits all when it clearly doesn't.
Exactly. They actually say
Yeah.
the concept of standard often ignores cultural, linguistic, and regional differences, which weakens the inclusivity that democracy strives for.
Yeah, it makes you think about how we define success, doesn't it?
For sure.
True equality isn't about treating everyone the same,
It's about recognizing and valuing our differences.
while making sure everyone has a real chance to succeed.
And that's the end of the first part of our deep dive.
Wow, we've covered a lot already.
Right. But it's just the beginning.
There's so much more to unpack here.
For sure. So stick with us as we continue to explore this super thought-provoking blog post
And delve even deeper into these really important questions.
about education, about democracy, about what kind of world we're building for future generations.
I'm ready. Let's keep going.
Me too.
It's kind of funny, you know?
What's that?
The blog post, it points out all these flaws with standardized testing,
Yeah.
but it doesn't really give any solutions. It's more like,
Yeah, call to action.
yeah, like it's throwing down the gauntlet.
It is like, okay, we've shown you the problems. Now what are you going to do about it?
Exactly. And that's where things get really juicy.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It forces us to ask those really big questions.
Okay, like what?
About the purpose of education in a democracy. What are we even trying to do with these tests?
Whoa.
What skills should we be teaching? How can we test those skills fairly?
So we need to find better ways to assess students.
Exactly.
Things that are more than just multiple choice and memorizing facts.
Right. Like what about project-based learning?
Ooh, yeah. Or portfolio assessments.
Even just giving students more chances to show what they know through presentations, discussions.
Yeah, stuff that lets them use their knowledge in the real world.
Be creative, work together.
Those are the skills they'll actually need.
To be successful, to be good citizens.
And it's not just about changing the tests, right?
No way.
It's about changing how we think about success in school.
Yes. Moving away from those narrow metrics like test scores.
Looking at the bigger picture.
Critical thinking, problem solving, communication skills.
Even things like empathy and emotional intelligence.
Right. Like, we got to reimagine the whole system.
Make it more about the students, about their growth, not just about passing tests. This blog post, even though it's about Nepal,
Yeah,
it has lessons for everyone, everywhere.
it does.
It's a reminder that creating a truly fair and democratic education system, that's a worldwide challenge.
A challenge we all share.
It is. It's like a wake-up call.
Yeah. It's like, hey, look at your own education system. Is it really preparing students for the world?
And is it giving them the tools they need to not just survive, but to make the world better?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right. These are big, important questions,
And we need to be asking them.
especially if we believe that education is the key to a strong democracy.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Because in the end,
Yeah.
it's not about passing tests, it's about empowering people
To reach their full potential.
and to help build a more just and fair world.
Totally agree.
Okay, now for a little something different.
Oh, like what?
It's time for that Razabari section at the end of the blog post.
Ooh, yeah, the raspberry.
Remember, Razabari means raspberry in Nepali.
Right, like a little jab.
It is. And this one is aimed at Nepal's Examination Control Office.
Oh, they're in trouble.
The author compares them to someone importing bad vegetables from India,
Wait, what?
keeping the farmers, in this case the teachers and schools, always in fear.
So it's like they're saying this fear-based system is actually holding back education.
Exactly. And turning students into people who are better at cheating than learning.
Oh, that's not good.
So what's the solution?
Well, the blog doesn't give easy answers, does it?
Not really.
It's more about getting us to think differently, to question things.
Challenge the status quo and imagine something better.
And that's where you come in, dear listener.
You got it.
Change starts with awareness. with conversations like this one.
People questioning things, demanding better.
It's like planting a seed.
This deep dive, maybe it'll spark some new ideas, some new discussions, even some new actions.
Who knows what could happen?
And even if it just makes you think about the role of education in your community, that's a win.
Any step in the right direction is a good step.
So, as we wrap up part 2,
Yeah.
remember, this conversation goes way beyond this podcast, beyond this blog post, beyond Nepal.
It's a global conversation
About how to create an education system that truly reflects the values of a democratic society. So where do we go from here? We've talked about this blog post, about the problems with standardized tests, even touched on some different approaches.
Right.
But what does it all mean for you listening right now?
That's the tricky part, isn't it? It's easy to get lost in the big ideas, but real change, that happens in our own lives, in our communities, in our schools.
It's about taking those ideas and figuring out, okay, how do I apply this to my life?
Right, whether you're a student or a parent or a teacher or just someone who cares about education.
Exactly.
It starts with asking yourself some hard questions.
Like what?
What are standardized tests doing in your community? Are they working the way they're supposed to? Are they really making things more fair? Or are they just making the problems worse?
And maybe even more importantly, what kind of education system do you want? What should we be teaching our kids? What would a truly democratic education system even look like?
Those are the questions. Right. And they're not easy.
Definitely not.
No simple answers.
But they're worth thinking about.
Because how we educate our kids will shape the future, literally.
Absolutely.
If you want to do something, there's so many ways to get involved.
Oh, yeah, totally.
You can talk to your friends, family, people at work,
Uh-huh.
get involved with your local school board, push for changes, support teachers who are trying new things.
Don't underestimate the power of your voice.
Share your thoughts, your worries, your ideas.
You never know who you might inspire.
Right. And remember that analogy from the blog post?
The eagle and the caged parrot.
Yeah, that one. Let's be the ones who fight for the eagles.
Champion creativity, critical thinking, all that good stuff.
Let's create schools that help those eagles soar.
Not clip their wings and lock them in a cage.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so to wrap up this whole deep dive, I want to leave you with one last thought.
Hit me with it.
It's a question, really.
Lay it on me.
If standardized tests really go against what a democracy stands for,
Yeah.
what other ways could we assess students that would actually help build a strong, inclusive democracy?
What could help us see how bright those eagles really are, instead of trapping them in a cage of just memorizing stuff?
That's the challenge. Think about it, talk about it, and hopefully do something about it.
Make a difference.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope it's made you think about education in a new way.
And maybe even inspired you to take action.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.